of LinkedIn Live by CIVOM. I am Akshay Bajaj, co-founder of Global Learning Space Network, and I am excited to host this session dedicated to the occasion of World Human Rights Day that is celebrated every year on 10th of December. The topic for today's session is Designing for Neuro-Inclusion, creating environments where every child thrives. And without further ado, let's do the shubharambh of this session by introducing the guest speakers. On first, we have architect Prachi Karthik Naig, design lead at Education Design International. Architect Prachi Naig is a transformative leader and design lead at EDI. Prachi truly believes in inspiring teams to exceed expectations, guiding them through complex projects while fostering collaboration and inclusion. With a powerful combination of creativity, technical expertise, and unwavering passion, she thrives on challenging projects that push the boundaries of design. Beyond her design work, Prachi is also deeply interested in social media marketing, the startup ecosystem, and growth strategies. Welcome to this session, Prachi ma'am. It's such
Yeah,
an honor to have you among us today.
thank you, Akshay Bajaj. Thanks for the warm welcome. And I'm truly thrilled to be part of this discussion today on International Human Rights Day. And thank you for giving this opportunity to be part of one of the panelists.
Now on second, we have architect Shivani Shah, CEO and founder Sensory All. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Shivani Shah, an architect and accessibility consultant who is passionate about creating inclusive spaces for everyone, especially neurodiverse individuals. As the founder and CEO of Sensory All, she is a champion for inclusive design in India. Shivani has been recognized for her work with awards like the Smart City Innovation Challenge and Inclusive Cities Award. She has also made significant contributions to the field, such as developing autism friendly experiences for museums and transforming the International Purple Fest in Goa into India's first neurodiverse friendly festival. We are delighted to have architect Shivani with us today. Welcome, Shivani, ma'am.
Hi Shivani.
I guess Shivani ma'am's screen went into a technical glitch, but again, we'll welcome her. And until then, I'll welcome Mr. Yogendra Patidar. And finally, we have Mr. Yogendra Patidar, Director of CIVOM. Yogi Patidar is a young award-winning entrepreneur, BW 40 Under 40 Education Award, who is passionate about changing education in India and beyond. He's a graduate of both EDI Ahmedabad and JNB, and he co-founded CIVOM, a company that designs learning spaces to help students become future leaders. He's also involved in other businesses and loves technology, philosophy, literature, fashion, and supporting his team. Welcome to this session, Yogi sir. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Welcome everyone. Welcome for the session.
So, welcome back, Shivani ma'am. We just gave your intro. Welcome to the session.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited for the session.
Great. This session is divided into five very thoughtful phases where we'll have quick questions for our guest speakers. And first theme for this session is understanding neurodiversity. So the first question of the session coming up is, and first question goes to actually architect Shivani Shah. So the first question is, how do we know when a child needs a specialized learning environment? And what are the indicators that a learning space might not be meeting their needs? Over to you, ma'am.
Um, so it's a very important question that how we know a child is not thriving in a learning environment. Before we get to the indicators, it's important for us to understand how do we learn or how do children learn at the first place. And so this is where the concept of neurodiversity comes into picture. Neurodiversity is a concept that talks about each one of us is unique in the way we think, respond, interpret to the different situations and stimulus in our environment. So, in that sense, every one of us is neurodiverse. We all think differently and respond differently, and specifically for children, because they are at a very early stage of understanding the world around them. They are not subjected to a lot of preconditioning. They are not used to forcing themselves to learn in a particular way or to respond in a particular way, and they can exhibit various ways of understanding or learning. One of the ways is the way in which I think I've learned when I was growing up is a very traditional structured classroom with a fixed routine, and the routine which was decided by teachers about how students should be learning. And then there is another way of learning which is now quite popular, where it's a very flexible way of working, where students do interactive sessions, storytelling session, experimentation, and then learn. And some children thrive in both the settings, a mixture of it. There are also children who are neurodivergent. So when we say neurodivergent, we are basically talking about children who have neurological challenges, developmental delays, such as who have autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, dyslexia, learning difficulties, and so on and so forth. So, looking at these two spectrum of neurodiversity and neurodivergence, it's important that we understand that the space that children occupy to learn and to grow becomes very important. And how do we design this space, and how do we understand that children are indicators that come into picture? There are three indicators that teachers can look for when they are trying to understand if a child needs any kind of support. The first simple academic indicator, if we are seeing the child is not progressing in the education or academics, falling behind, not able to cope up with other children in the class, that's to try to think what could be, what are the various possibilities or trigger points because of. Second is behavioral indicators, where we see children having reduced attention, throwing tantrums, or seen largely distracted in the environment, have social exclusion, social anxiety. So behavioral patterns are important to notice. And the third are sensors, which is if you see a child closing their ear or stimming back and forth, having showing behaviors that might mental factors. So I think these are important to notice very early on when the child is learning, and then provide suit accommodations for that. Now, in terms of accommodations, we have the concept of specialized interventions and specialized environment, but it's important to understand that every child will need individualized understanding of how they learn. So not everyone who benefit from specialized environment or specialized intervention is a child with a disability or developmental delay. Largely, every child will be able to will exhibit some or the other way of learning in a different way, and so it's important to respect the neurodiversity that they bring forward. Yes.
Very, very beautifully explained, like how each one of us is a neurodivergent individual and how we can focus on behavioral aspects and indicators right from the early ages. And the three indicators highlighted by architect Shivani Shah are behavioral indicators, academic indicators, and sensory indicators. And this brings me to the next question for, again, architect Prachi and Yogi sir to discuss the challenges of traditional classroom models that often prioritize a single learning style and how they can lead to labeling and exclusion. Over to you.
Yeah. So basically, we've all studied, most of us have studied in a traditional classroom setting where I remember during my childhood, we used to only ask to look at the chalkboard and what teacher is going to write, right? But then when I used to go back home and study, I figured out certain ways which can help me memorize things better. So, like, I remember I used to translate those paragraphs into some scenes on the drawing sheet, and that is how I used to remember. So this then when I started practicing as a designer, it made me realize that how every child, when they are learning into the classroom, can have these kind of limitations in grasping what the teacher is trying to explain, right? So as a designer, it's our job for us to help them learn in a better way, so that they are able to learn inside the classroom setting, which can optimize their skills of absorbing things what teacher are teaching them. So when we design, when EDI is approaching any school design, we try to make any classroom as flexible as possible in terms of various seating patterns, flexibility of converting one zone into the another, so that teachers are able to utilize in different ways of learning. So that is how typically we approach any school design, and that's really crucial nowadays when we are addressing, as Shivani has already highlighted, that it's not about a special needs children, it's about every child who wants to learn in different ways, because they are unique in their own ways. So yeah, that's from my part, and maybe probably Yogi sir can add a little more.
Like
So
it's
I feel from
yes.
a traditional classroom models, we need to understand why those are being designed in first place. If we look at the thought process behind all that, is came from an industrial era, that you do not want to educate them, but you rather wanted to train them. Okay.
Right.
So training was the big objective, because they can work to the machines, they can work into an assembly line systems where they are been given something and they can, be proficient around it, not creative. So when we see, the whole structure was been with the knowledge of a teacher and been passed, trained for certain skills. Okay. And they had to be proficient around it. So it is like training, someone through a machine learning language, or there's something which is you evolving towards that. And once you do this kind of thing, you eventually producing someone who's been working towards certain skills. So if you look at people, they may not know what the application may be, but they have that skill. Okay, so I always give this example that, figuring out of an volume of an egg, okay, will not be able to do it easily. Okay, and if there is a critical brain, he can say that I will put it into water and just look at the volume changes. But every one of us goes to formula, because we have been trained to look at the formula first. Okay, we did integral calculus in our life, but we never knew that volume of n can be figured out from integral calculus. Okay, so this is what we never go into the real life situation, where I see classroom should be the model where we can experiment real life things in that laboratory, so that when we go into real life, we can look at that. So at a vision level, it was been, because who decides, what we should study or how we should study is the government, and they keep continuously looking that the country to run to the economic or commercial way of doing things. And when they see technology and those growths, they figured out this way. When today you say information age or intelligence age coming, that change is, inevitable. We had to look at that differently. So this is where I feel, that's what is labeling around, and that's, the whole idea of traditional ways making a factory product. So that's why you put your kids, or as a product system rather than a human development. So today we are on Human Rights Day. We when we look at traditional schooling, it's a labeling that you are A grader student, you're B grader, you're C grader. It's like labeling a quality of product, where, like Shivani mentioned about neurodiversity of every individual, where we have our own way to look at life, or have our own preferences and choices. So that's what is, I feel need to get through. So it is where the exclusion comes in the whole process rather than inclusion.
I must admit that this discussion has taken a very interesting turn, and it was quite interesting how, Architect Prachi, you used visual learning to translate your learnings at school while you got back home, and how this came naturally to you. And
Yes.
Yogi sir, thank you so much for highlighting how traditional classrooms were preferred during the industrial age, and how now the government is moving towards, and many stakeholders are also moving towards developing new age classrooms or new age learning spaces, to be specific.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
that calls for the conclusion of the first phase, and that gives me a great start to the second phase. The second phase theme is designing for diverse learners. And the first question comes up to Architect Prachi. Ma'am, please share design strategies for creating inclusive learning environments that cater to a wide range of needs and preferences. Over to you.
Okay. So basically, to understand why we need to create an inclusive environment, as I highlighted earlier, every child needs to understand different concept differently. So to cater to the large group of students, we need to create those zones inside a classroom. For example, when a teacher is explaining certain mathematical problem on the blackboard, not necessary that other set of students are following, but the moment she sits along with them on a table and explains those concepts with the help of building blocks, or say maybe abacus, right? So the student is immediately grasping those concepts in a much better way. And when you understand the concept rather than just rote learning pattern, you are basically well prepared in life. You will remember those concepts for lifelong, wherein I don't remember what I mucked up in the history when I was in grade 5, right? But the moment I write it down or understand that concept thoroughly, yes, that concept can always be remembered throughout my life. So when it comes to designing a space in for inclusive learning for students, we typically try to integrate different kind of spaces within the classroom itself. For example, different cognitive learning zones, sensory zones, variety of learning spaces which can accommodate these kind of concepts, basically either on blackboard or also in a project based learning. Flexible furniture layouts where a teacher is allowed to reconfigure the layouts in a way she can accommodate these different types of learning. So these are the basic design principles when we approach the design of any institution and a classroom, so that we are catering to a large array of students and their needs.
Wonderfully elaborated the kind of zones they create in the learning spaces and how they cater to the needs of every learner. And that brings me to the question for Mr. Yogendra Patidar. So please discuss how CIVOM approaches designing for neurodiversity and creating spaces that empower all learners.
Okay. Thank you, Akshay, for the question. Before I start how CIVOM approaches, I would like Abhilash to connect to the presentation if he can. So, like I was mentioning in the first thinking, how do we really see the traditional versus the today's environment? Okay, it's very important into understanding. One part is what is that end goal which we really wanted to go through. Okay, and if we say designing for neuro inclusion, what does it really means? Okay, so I kind of liked how Shivani simply dissect the whole idea of that, how the way every human perceives or process information has that neurodiversification. Now idea is to include every individual, every human in that setting, in that environment is where we need to focus around. So how do we really do it? CIVOM is typically, if I'll go forward, so I always say, what should be the goal of education? The most of the education in industrial age and earlier ages was been designed around occupation. Today, still, whole of education system is designed around having goal of occupation, what I would become eventually. And we have another psychological, issues coming in later ages, midlife crisis, identity crisis, because I'm not able to follow the passion which I'm made for. It is not to my neuro thought process. Okay, so the way my happy hormones release, I'm not doing that. I'm not following my passion. So if we really need to see how we can do it, so I believe today the goal of education, the goal of environment need to be designed around self elevation rather than a occupation. If I understand myself, I connect to myself, if I connect to my passions, hobbies, I'll be the happiest person, and whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to be happier around it. So the education or environment need to be designed for self elevation. uh, Today, if and why I'm saying that today it is possible, because it is again, remodeling of gurukuls. Okay, if we go to idea of gurukul, every individual was been taken by gurus, and they were being looked at what is their own gift, and that's what it nourished around. So if I see someone's gift can be nourished, okay, and then you get skills. So I say, let's say, why we have this caste and creed system, okay, which later on been taken into religion, but that was started as a skill force, that if I am carpenter, I like doing working in woods, this was skill oriented segmentation. Someone who's a goldsmith, it was his skill, his orientation, his passion towards that, and that's what making them like that. So Gurukul had thought on those edges. Okay, today technology has given us an immense power to choose learning in our primordial way. Okay, that we can learn as an individual, because I believe a lot of content is not needed to get to teachers. So I also feel that technology need to be got to teach with teachers rather than students. Okay, students need to have the curiosity and questions to be asked. So I see if meaning of the Pablo Picasso's quote says the meaning of life is to find your gift and the purpose of life is to give it away. That's what self elevation can look like. So I will quickly run to the few things which Prachi also mentioned about the spaces and all. So we believe a real learning system can be designed around at the concentration of people, process, and places. Okay, so people, I mean teachers, school owners, managements, parents, learners. Processes can be programs, curriculums, values, ethos. The institution operates around, and the place and the environment which is need to be created. So if all three is not connected together, learning cannot happen. Learning cannot be designed in the way every human or neuro inclusion can be needed. The process we generally follow is, what do we want our learners to become? What experience can make that becoming happen? What space enable those experience, and how do we know? So there is a lot of research happening around how human learns, like Shivani, Prachi, and other team who's expertise around understanding how learning happens and converting them into a experience and space relation. Post that. So if you go forward, we have dissected, Abhilash, can you move through? So, think if you want our learners to happy, positive attitude, stress-free, self-directed, empathetic, optimistic, adaptable, what kind of experience can help it out? What spaces are needed? So, a couple of zones have been already, mentioned by Prachi about, creating sensory zones or wellness zones or, safe spaces, flexible settings, cave zones. So, all that spaces kind of allow us that connection, that how I am able to configure myself in that setting. Okay, and then that connects to the teaching methodology around it. So forward to it is gone. So just run a couple of space images which we have done. There are a few which we have done with EDI in collaboration. So a quick run, Abhilash, if you can look through. So this is multi-tier spaces, allowing them flexibility to stand and work, sit on the floor. So all flexible settings, So we have a very strong connection to somatic cognitive action networks. So when you talk about body and mind coming together, you need that physiological flexibilities also to help stimulate the information. Okay, active environments where supporting activities, self interactions. Okay, going forward. So if you see, creative zones, again, flexible settings like Prachi was mentioning, going close to kids, explaining the concepts, connecting them well with the concept understanding. Again, other flexible choices. Abhilash, you have to be a little quick. The cave zones, self-reflection areas. Just run through, Abhilash. Sorry, I don't have the control with me. So open and lit areas, this is again another stimuli to have natural environment connected. So and even the concept of having multiple teachers in the classroom instead of only one teacher. So one is engaged into teaching, another is engaged in observing. Okay, allowing them self directions. Okay, go forward. So relaxed areas. There's a new concept called Zen spaces in classrooms, or Zen zones. Allowing mindfulness, having them giving that time to breathe in. Okay, um, go forward. So there's a chill zone, basically, a focus zone where if you want to get through your book or read or work something, you can look into this. Silent zones is another thing. Choice-driven engagement. So, if we see this, there's a lot of connection to every individual's choices and allowances. And that's why I say it's very important to understand what is the vision of an institute and how does it bring to connection. So yeah, that's what we are building around. Happy faces, fun environment. Connecting all neurodiverse individuals. Thank you, Vilash.
So I guess this presentation indeed lives up to its last slide, happy faces and fun environment that this presentation turned out to be. Thank you for such a vibrant presentation, Yogi sir. And that calls for the conclusion of the second phase and gives way to the third phase of this session. And the theme for this phase is challenging labels and promoting inclusion. So the question coming up for architect Shivani Shah is, ma'am, please address the issue of labeling children and its potential negative impact. And please also explain how the environment can play a role in shaping behavior and development. Over to you, ma'am.
Right. So, am I audible properly?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, why is labeling bad? Labeling is not bad. Labeling is bad. Labeling is at a very thin line: identification, segmentation, and labeling. So that's when labeling becomes really bad. We need to identify children in order to create personalized learning plans, in order to understand what accommodation each child might need. And traditionally, also, if we look at the medical model of disability or medical model of psychology, we needed to identify people in order to see what treatment works for them. So labeling has been really important part of everything and anything that we have achieved in terms of treating human beings. The problem is that when we do identify people and we try to categorize them into steps, like what we were discussing, patient and how a carpenter will be, if it there's a segmentation, they know that that's how they have to work. Labeling plays a very important role there. But now the problem arises is when we look at these labels in a negative way. Like if there's a class where some can learn fast, some children are not able to cope in a fast learning phase, we label them as slow learners. Slow learners is a labeling that gives a negative connotation that if someone is slow, definitely someone is fast, and one who's than the one who's slow. So it's important that this entire getting from labeling will not help. How do we articulate or give means to the label is where we have to work on. So it is more like rephrasing the word as slow learners to something which is more dignified. This is where vocabulary plays a major role. So I wouldn't say that labeling is bad. I think labeling is important. Let us look at labeling more as identification of different children with different learning patterns and see accommodate them better. Need to provide a vocabulary for it. Let's look at a vocabulary which is more dignified, which helps to promote positive, uh, um, not negative stereotypes, but it gives a positive idea about how the child is different in a unique way. And I think this is the way labeling needs to be looked at a learning environment and even at any other workplace environment, different people working together. Now, coming on to the second question that you said, that how environment empowers people or children in that setup. So we've seen many examples, what Prachi said, what Yogi sir presented, that uh, in an environment we have different, when we design, we do not know what is, who is going to use the space in what manner. And so it's important to provide as many choices as possible, because we are always anticipating. As designers, we never know for sure how a child is going to use this space, but we are always anticipating that they might need a corner for reflection, they might need this. So in the journey of development and achievement, there are the different factors a child needs to go through curious learning, reflections, and I think designing for that and providing options for each of that. Options in the way spaces are used, and also options in the way spaces will be accessed. So, like if you have staircase versus ramp, there's always a debate, but why not have a staircase and ramp both? Because then I have an option to what to use when, in what situation. So, I think flexibility in design, but then providing the choice also gives an agency. One of the very important things early on children learn in an environment is to take decision. If you have multiple choices in the environment, I am able to take decision of what is good for me in what situation. And decision making starts happening at a school level if there are a lot of choices. In that ways, various small factors can help a child decide better for themselves. So I think this is these are some of the ways in which we can look. I hope I was audible. I think there was a lag.
Yes.
Yeah, very wonderful explanation of all those points of labeling and inclusion. And this reminds me indeed of my own nephew is just hardly 2.5 to 3 years old. And recently, while he had his first sports competition in school, we are like my brother-in-law and sister knew that he isn't that active or that fast. So they didn't place him in the 100 meters or 200 meters race. They placed him in the slow walking competition. And after this competition, he came winning a gold medal and he was too happy with that. So that is how we have to place them where they are best at. And
Correct.
that brings me to the next question for architect Prachi.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, please answer like, can some behavioral or learning challenges be addressed through a well designed environment, or do they always require specialized intervention?
Yes, sometimes specialized interventions are required, but obviously, some learning challenges can be addressed through a well designed space. Like I was mentioning, creating zones in the classroom, having the sensory kind of experience where touch and feel is possible. Some kids are more receptive towards sensory elements. When they touch and feel, they are able to grasp things in better instead of somebody explaining them on the whiteboard. So it is absolutely necessary. Definitely a sensory friendly space can reduce overstimulation in the children, reduce anxiety in children. So when they are calm and relaxed, they are more receptive towards the knowledge which is being taught to them in the classroom. So yes, completely, and I really in sync with what Shivani has also outlined. Labels are important, but how positive they are, that is more important. So yeah, absolutely.
The last quote was very amazing. That may go on to become the most reverberating thought of the day. And that brings me to the closure of this session by giving the mic to Mr. Yogendra Patidar. Sir, please discuss strategies for creating inclusive classrooms where all children feel valued and supported.
See, that's what I'm telling you. It starts first and foremost at the vision level. Are you designing an institute which really wants learning to be paramount, or you are, designing an institute which is a commercially run factory styled, institute? So we had to segregate the whole idea of commerce between a product development and human development. If we can have that vision first and foremost, then an organization can be built in further segmentation. Because if I don't have that, even if a teacher is going to put in effort of human development, you will be forced to do a product development. So it starts with the vision first. If vision is right, then comes out to be the roles of teachers and educators. So I always feel, being in a traditional mindset, role of teachers always been into forcing down to certain, Shivani was mentioning about academic indicators. So teacher has been looked at it mostly at academic indicators, okay, and they feel the success or failure is from there. But if I say, instead of having that kind of pressure to teacher, if we give them a role of researcher, okay, if teachers are researchers, think of it. If you're at public speaking and you're speaking something and a kid is sleeping, or a kid is nodding in negative direction, You'll feel, because you are also measuring yourself. How am I delivering? Okay. So think it, if you're a researcher, you're trying to figure out that this guy is not able to understand. Okay. He's disinteresting inside it. This particular way of teaching may not be falling right. So if teachers are researchers, they don't have a fear of failing or passing themselves. So first they become open to perceive the idea that we can change the game, we can change the different ways, and then process towards it. Okay, and third comes out giving the notion to every learner that I'm coming here for learning. Ask kids one why they are going for schools. Okay, so their first reaction is the community, their friends, the people around them. It is never been that curiosity or the excitement to learn. So how do we give them head of learner that I'm going to learn something new today without being judged on anything. So the moment I start opening those layers from teachers and learners both, we create an environment which is more fostering towards it. And then comes the environment and the choices which we have there. Okay, so it's a very very important to understand learning signals, which is maybe behavioral, having a smile, pupil dilations, my postures, interest, engagement, activeness, all of that. If I have all this signaling right, I can look at different groups, giving them different foods, helping them with the conceptual understanding and taking them to real life connections. That's where we can really build those you know inclusive environments. So this layers has to get from humans first, and then comes the role of environment and the curriculum suppose that.
Great explanation. Thank you, Yogi sir, for giving us deep insights into how learning spaces can be improved with those points that you mentioned. And now we are heading over to a case study, a very interesting case study for the first time on our LinkedIn live session that will be presented by architect Prachi, and where she will be presenting a case study of a school or learning center designed with neurodiversity in mind. Ma'am, it's over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Akshay. So, as an EDI, as an organization, we approach all our educational projects with a thought in mind that every child is unique and their learning needs to be addressed so that they are at their best and they are equipped for life rather than only equipped for exams, right? So, keeping that thought in mind, we designed a very interesting school. It's called American Embassy School. I'll just quickly run you through the overall school and a special needs center we designed for them. Is my screen visible?
Not
Ma'am,
yet.
it's perfect. Please.
Yeah, so neuro inclusion in school design is nothing but designing environments which embrace different learning styles of every child, right? So basically, how to make the learning environment itself so conducive that you don't have to force anybody to learn. That is the aim of the design here. So when it comes to neuro inclusion, what we have been seeing is it when a space is designed in keeping all the constraints in mind, the output of the space is totally exceptional in terms of learning, in terms of equity and inclusion, and also the promoting a sense of belonging and creating a learning community there. So basically, how we have evolved as a human, we have always lived in a community, right? So that keeping that concept in mind, our aim is to create a community which learns together, not by excluding anybody, but more having an inclusive pattern of learning. So if you see in this image the tree where the teacher is just sitting with couple of kids and explaining some story there, some kids are doing hands on activity. So if you just look at this entire classroom, it is filled with sensory elements, project and hands on project based learning elements. Any child can pick up anything and start learning by themselves, basically making every child very independent, more open and receptive to learnings with sensory elements, and also giving them an opportunity to try out different things inside the classroom instead of just telling them that rote learning or the traditional classroom learning is the way to learn things. Now, coming to key design principles, what we typically adapt to is having sensory inclusive environments, variety of learning spaces, flexible arrangements in the classroom, wherein the child themselves are able to arrange furniture and also play with it in the form of active seatings, wherein they learn balancing skills. Inclusive community spaces, which is kind of a learning community wherein you are making every child part of that community, and the growth for the growth, everybody is contributing towards the growth. Easy wayfinding and casual visual clarity. So it is part of making every child very independent. So the smooth surfaces, clear visual signages help children navigate through the entire spaces very easily. Another thing is well-being focus. We completely believe in making the well-being as a priority. Now everybody talks about it, which is a very challenging area in a very stressed environment these days. So creating spaces which are very calm with soothing colors, also having nook spaces for self-reflection for the kids. So well-being is also addressed through different elements. These are some of the examples how we integrate, like for example in the left hand side where the children are sitting there, you see curved surfaces, smooth surfaces where child is easily able to move through instead of getting stuck somewhere. The next is introducing biophilic element. We have seen that lot of kids are more receptive. The moment you go out in the sunlight, you have lot of energy. You are easily tend to grasp things very easily when you are in the nature. So bringing those elements, biophilic elements, inside the classroom, which helps students learn quickly. Third is escape nooks. Like if you see a child is sitting in that escape nook, the another child is reading a book by themselves. So this allows a self-reflection time for the kids, wherein a child is also processing what he and she is learning inside the classroom. That is very important because kids are put through a lot of rigorous schedules in the school these days, wherein they don't get self-reflection time. So creating these spaces are very important. Third is partition zone. Like as I mentioned, every classroom has to be a self-sustainable zone wherein teachers are able to carve out different zones with the help of movable furniture, flexible furnitures. Wherein if you see that one child is experimenting with sensory wall, another child is just sitting here doing some kind of hands-on project work. So basically, allowing the maximum level of flexibility inside the space. So, when we are dealing with special needs children, our major challenge here to address cognitive and learning skills, wherein your brain development has to take place. The second is behavioral and emotional and social skills, wherein a structured and safe environment and calming areas are able to address the challenges of behavior in a particular child. Third is communication and interaction, wherein we are having sensory elements, soothing noise, soothing sounds, not noise, and simple textures, wherein a child is able to easy communicate very easily with each other. Fourth is sensory and physical, wherein say disabled child needs some kind of special arrangement in the classroom in the form of ramps, in the form of physically abled spaces, wherein they are able to navigate on their own. The kind of spaces which we need to design for these students are very very different than what we design for other normal students. So when we are dealing and designing spaces for special needs children, these are the four main parameters where we have to keep in mind and accordingly design the space. So like you see use of gradient colors to calm their mind, um, balancing beams, balancing disc for them to learn the balance basically, like in the form of active seating where a child is constantly sitting. Sometimes some kids are very restless, they have to move there and shake their legs constantly to get rid of the anxiety. Basically, these are the ways for them to release their stress. Then it is tactile and sensory elements. So use of tactile elements helps them, like I was mentioning, some people are more receptive towards the visual aspect of learning. So this helps them experiment and feel different things and learn through it. Quickly coming to the spaces, so the way we approached this, we wanted to design this space in creating an environment which kind of inculcates self learning, also gives them a very safe and calm space to reduce their anxiety and also deal with their different behavioral issues. So I'll just quickly glance through the visuals, how we design this, keeping their different challenges in mind. If you see on the right hand side, they have life skill counters wherein they can go cut a fruit, experiment how the cooking, gasless cooking is done. Third is, if you see this balancing disc where the child can stand on it and learn the balancing skills in life. Yeah, similarly, the tree where what you're seeing, they can go and paste their pictures and talk about their family tree. So basically, teaching different concept through these sensory elements is much more impactful rather than just explaining them on the blackboard. Similarly, if you can see, there is a abacus for them to learn math and manipulative skills or counting skills, basically. Yeah, these are some of the active seats example wherein they can sit and keep moving, learn the balancing skills. Few more visuals of the space. If you see, even the doors and this thing, windows are of very circular shapes, which kind of creates a very soothing environment. Coming to the sensory classroom, wherein the room is filled with bubble tubes which has multicolor, and the overall ambient lighting is made in such a way that automatically you go into trance mode wherein your mind is relaxed. So integrating such elements which kind of helps in making these concepts clear with the physical environment becomes very easy. Coming to occupational therapy, wherein the child is learning about mobility skills, so providing them with different seating options, the balls where they can jump on, the swings. If you see, there are a number of variety of swings which can be which any child can learn how to use them. So basically getting acquainted them with the different kind of mobility options. Then coming to speech therapy, we have a dedicated speech therapy zone wherein psychologists are giving different sessions to the children. So the room is well equipped with all the equipments. Also, at the same time, the equipments which they can teach these linguistic skills to the children. Yeah, that's about it, Akshay. So yeah, we had a very, I mean, kind of pleasure working on this project because uh, we had to think very differently from how we usually design the other schools. These are very differently able children, wherein you need to also make them part of the rest of the school. So that is when the challenge comes in, where we are designing schools for them and a center for them so that they feel one of us.
Of course, a mind-blowing presentation, and that was a visual feast for all of us watching you live from different parts of the world. And thank you so much, Prachi ma'am, for sharing the key design principles, spatial requirements, and the overall concept behind the designing of American Embassy School. And
Thank
that brings us to the final phase of this session. And the question coming, and there'll be quick questions in this phase. So the first question coming up is for Architect Shivani Shah. Ma'am, please provide guidance on how parents can navigate the challenges of labeling and access appropriate support for their children.
Right. So I think in the school environment, like we discussed the indicators, a lot of responsibility lies on a teacher to do early identification. Now, there are various ways in which teachers are being empowered to know and identify early on if a child has a learning disability or they require different kinds of support or accommodation. So, very active in the school environment, if we have a counseling cell or a cell which or teachers if they are trained in early identification, I think that is the first point of support for parents for the same. Then the second thing in the environment is that once their triggers are being identified either by teachers or by parents themselves, there are many assessment centers in India. These assessments are done by clinical psychologists where they test a child in order to understand various places where the support could be required. The assessments are also done by disability organizations in India where they assess a child for different kinds of disabilities or neurodivergence that they might have. So I think having awareness of such centers, such assessments, and where can we go for is very important for parents to know. And I think school environment should provide that to the parents because that's the first point of contact for any parent to know and acquire information. So I think the second thing is also for parents to understand that uh, none of this is normal or abnormal. I think we have to get away from the idea of normalcy. We think that some children are special and some children are normal. uh, if we believe in the fact that every child is unique, which means none of us are normal or none of us are special. We all are unique and in the way we see the world around us. So we might need different accommodations at different points in our life. So we in the disability community currently are fighting really hard to get away from these euphemisms, differently abled, specially abled, because they, again, while we were discussing labeling, they were there to identify people who might need accommodations, but then they did more harm than good. And then they created an environment of exclusion. That every time we look at people who have differences, kind of start thinking, okay, might be needing different kinds of things than the other children or other people need. But if you think like a lot of saw today, I felt that a lot of things are very common between children who have autism might not have any diagnosed conditions. So parents need to also be a lot of sensitization and awareness programs are important for parents to join generally also, even if your child is diagnosed or if your child is facing any difficulty or not, so that we can get away from these negative connotations around the labeling and can reach out to the support that is being provided in a positive way. Resource list should be shared with parents from the school end, or various child development centers should be able to provide what are the facilities in a city that are available for parents to avail such support or such facilities. And the presentation that Prachi showed, the kind of school that is being made, schools should also open their doors to other children from other communities to be a part of making it truly inclusive. So such kind of infrastructure in the presentation is not accessible for most children in India today who really require these kinds of supports. So I think one of the other ways, not for parents but for stakeholders to see how this support could be extended, is opening their doors maybe in the evening for other part of the marginalized communities of children who might not be diagnosed or identified but need learning support, uh, accommodating them in the part of the learning environment. So I think these are some of the strategies where each one of us has a part to play. And parents should be at the receiving end of all of these facilities. So yeah, I think this could be one of the ways to go about it.
Yeah, and I
Good.
also add to this, sorry, that when we do this clinical psychology also, but the way we translate this again, labeling it in such a way that can we not tell them as a talent gaps, you know, rather than putting it as a abnormal or a normal condition. if I put it as a talent gap, that I may not have this particular talent which is in the gap. So I start relabeling it into more positive direction rather than having it to a neuro divergent, or a psychological disorder probably. So if you put it as a talent gaps for this particular thing, and then we treat it out in leveling up to the talent, is much better way to translate that rather than putting into a psychological disorder. So
Right.
that itself would start making all clinical psychologists accepting more, rather than having it to be considering into a negative connotation.
Well, that was
Right.
information.
But I'd also want to add not negative. That's a thing that we are reclaiming now as a society. Uh, Autism, ADHD, these terms are not negative. These are just another way of being. And so it's also important because a lot of accommodations that provides today, you can only avail if you have identified as a particular kind of disability or a person with disability. So there's a very thin line between but identification, and one must navigate it in a very carefully. So a child must not be devoid of the accommodations that are legally made for them, because we wanted to safeguard them from the negative connotation. So we should be very mindful and careful in navigating this line of identification and labeling as caregivers or stakeholders from different industries. At the end of the day, legal rights should not be violated for any child who might need accommodations or specialized accommodations. So, this is also very important to understand.
So I guess those were some unique, game-changing, and bold solutions proposed by architect Shivani Shah that are going to make bold impact, and an amazing turn given by Yogi sir. And that calls for the final question to architect Prachi and Yogi sir, both of you. So please offer advice for parents and educators on how to advocate for inclusive design in their schools and support children with diverse needs.
Yeah. So I think first, what parents need to do is they need to really relax. Right now, in this challenging and fast moving world, we have a lot of expectations from ourselves as well as from kids, right? Which then puts a lot of stress on our children right now who are put into those educational institutions. So just we need to put them in a relaxed environment where they are more receptive. So when we design the schools, we are making sure that the child is completely at ease and completely is feeling at home. That is when you can optimize the space for your learning activities, right? So advice to parents: yes, be relaxed, put them in an environment where they are at ease, where they are more receptive towards learning activities. It can be an outdoor setting, it can be indoor setting where they are able to learn on their own, and kids are very good at learning on their own because their mind is very open. They don't have too many cluttered thoughts going on into their mind, so they are in the present moment wherein they are able to focus on those things without any distractions. So yes, that is very important to create such environments which enables us, I mean the kids, to learn at their best.
Thank you, Prachi ma'am. Thank you for those insights. Yogi sir, over to you.
No, I think so. Like Prachi mentioned, I just continue from there. Kids are very open to molding and change. It is adult who comes with resistance. Be it parent, be it teachers, we have long list of resistance, and we do not want it to get away with that. So the first and foremost advice would be open that. The times which is, so we are seeing everything in today's context. But if you talk about kids, take a context of 20 years from here or 15 years from here. Okay, if you can extrapolate that time and technology and the environment and the behavior is going to be post 15, 20 years down the line, you would see everything kids choose can have a unique niche. Okay, whatever they wish, like it can be a combination of a dancer and a photographer. Okay, it can be anything. Just take any interdiscipline, transdiscipline, you'll figure out a beautiful career for you. It is not from the past, so don't inspire from the past, inspire from the future. and let them choose whatever they, it can be a hobby which is connected to a profession, or a particular subject, and combine them. There would be a beautiful subject coming in, a beautiful niche coming in, and the world is going to be giving you the opportunity for doing this. So I always say, think of a guy who's doing a camera design for Apple. What kind of education, what kind of passion he would have gone through. Think about it. That would be very different set of knowledge or skills you would have acquired. So there is so beautiful careers coming for them. So don't think about what careers has, because earlier it was the occupation which used to decide what should I study. Today whatever you have passion can decide a career for you. So it is going to be reverse way rather than the past way. So be open about it. There's a beautiful feature for us, and no technology can take human power from us. I always say the second galaxy to Milky Way is Andromeda. This is the kind of expansion humans have. So no artificial intelligence can take human intelligence. We have so much to expand around. And of course, it is just a choice that if you save your time through technology and you still wanted to do your dishes, your choice. So what do you want to do with the use of technology is a choice, and how do you want to expand yourself is there. So a beautiful future for us. Just open up yourself, and let them choose what they are as an individual and shape it out. It's always says the best way of education is agriculture way. Okay, you put the seed, water the plant, fertilize it, and let them grow with their own pace. Don't force it out. So yeah, that's my take.
That was an impressive conclusion to these 60 minutes that we had today. And that turned out to be one of the most vibrant session we had for CIVOM's LinkedIn live session. That is Neuro-Inclusion designing for neuro-inclusion, creating environments where every child thrives. And of course, that was a befitting tribute to World Human Rights Day that we are celebrating today. And to everyone in the audience who have questions for our guest speakers, please leave them on the comment section of LinkedIn, YouTube, or Instagram, or wherever you are watching it live from anywhere across the world. And our guest speakers would be very happy to answer those. And now,
See, there's also one more thing, Akshay. I would like to mention a comment came from Kenya for us, and
yes,
it says, "Every child matters. It is the learning environment that disables children, not the inherent disability in them."
impressive,
You know,
very impressive.
yeah. So
Right.
it is very, very strong responsibility to all of us, that how education is making them less creative rather than their inner disabilities. So a big responsibility to all of us.
Thank you. Thank you for highlighting that comment that made our day. And that calls for the vote of thanks to all our guest speakers and the organizations, to architect Shivani Shah and Sensory all for joining us live today. It was an honor to host you, then architect Prachi Naig, and to the team of EDI. We are again delighted to host you, and to Mr. Yogendra Patidar and his team at CIVOM. It's an honor to host all of you together. And that calls for the close of today's session. So everywhere, wherever you are watching it live, to the audience all around the world, please keep following the pages of CIVOM and all the organizations that are associated for these sessions, and stay tuned for exciting activities coming up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks a lot,
Thank you,
everyone.
Akshay,
Thanks,
for
Akshay.
being
Thank you,
here.
Bye.
Shivani. Thank you,